Hello, Active Sage here on the Sage channel, and I'm here today to show you guys these two Lo-Rovers. That's well, Lo as in L-O, as I've decided to call them. Not exactly the most creative name ever, I know, but I call them that because they're a bit low, L-O-W, to the ground. Even though, in fact, if I was to go ahead and spin the camera down here, you can see they're actually not all that low. And I also called these two different vehicles, didn't I? Two different rovers. In fact, they are pretty much exactly the same. The one on the left is different from the one on the right in one way. It doesn't have thrusters or gyroscopes. So, let's go ahead and just show you guys these vehicles. Now, I was originally thinking of holding off on showing these until planets were in, but it occurs to me I don't really know when that's going to be. It could be next week, or it could be a couple of months from now, depending on how many bugs and how much refinement they want to do to it before they push it out. So I'm just going to go ahead and show these now. These are mainly intended as exploration crafts. They're pretty simple, so I'm going to hop in the basic one here and start driving it about. Their top speed is pretty low. As you can see, I have a bunch of artificial masses on the top. Theoretically, once we do make planetfall, I won't need those anymore. As for turning, it has front and rear wheel turning. As you can see here, the front and rear wheels turn. The center wheels stay the same. I believe it has 6-wheel drive. It has been a few days since I finished building on this thing, and it works pretty well. I do have speed set to be relatively slow because I don't know exactly what kind of terrain we're going to run into on planet, so I wanted this thing to be able to cover most. As I mentioned, it's mainly intended for exploration. With that in mind, you might be landing upon a planet without oxygen. So if we were to go ahead and head back to where we started off from, you can see I have a stripped down version of this vehicle there, so I can actually show you what its inner workings are like. Please note the artificial masses that we're seeing there to our right are only there to hold this to the ground. The only artificial masses that are actually on this are the ones that you can see at the top there. These are, as I just said, just to hold it down. So we'll start at the back and move forward. You can see we have our connector port that you can see sticking out of the back of all the rovers. In front of that, or I guess behind it, whichever way you're thinking about that, we have three small, medium storage containers with an antenna on top of one. That way all the vehicles can communicate with one another. Then we have an oxygen storage tank. I believe that's an oxygen storage tank. Let me just do a double check. In the area here, yes, it is an oxygen tank, not a generator. So you will have to stock up from a larger source. I might theoretically want to switch that out in the future for a generator, but I'm not quite sure. That pipes into 2 large reactors. That leads up to a cockpit at the front, which is of course also piped in with oxygen. Hopefully in the future, when planets are added, we'll actually be able to go ahead and stick a vent to this. Unfortunately, right now, vents are only available on large ships and stations, but it would be nice to be able to stick a vent on it and set to depressurize. That way it could pull in oxygen from the outside world and store it in tanks and, of course, pipe it directly to your cockpit. Now, you've seen the basic one here. I showed you it moves relatively well, even if a bit slow. It is a pretty hefty beast. You can see it's actually, as I showed in the beginning, pretty big. But, of course, its inside space isn't really, well, open. It's just a single-person rover. I am planning in the future to make a version where basically it's going to be a bit taller, where there's going to be actually seating for a bunch of people in there. Maybe even a bit of a living area. But with that one shown, I'll go over here to the altered version. And you might have noticed it earlier when I flew a camera under it, that there were some thrusters down here. So you can see here we have some thrusters set up, as well as if we fly inside this beast. I believe if we fly to the back of it, yes, you can see we have our assortment of gyroscopes in there. Did we hide a few more down here? I guess not. So let's go ahead and hop in this one. And of course, with all those gyroscopes in there, I could turn on my UI, and you can see I can actually turn them on, and I can move the craft about like this, or I can leave them off and disengage our parking brake and drive this vehicle normally. Now, of course, I have all those thrusters on the bottom, so what I can do is turn them on with the number 2 button, and you can see instantly I'm not going anywhere, because the amount of artificial mass ensures that this vehicle will actually stay down. And I'm suspecting this is often what you're going to run into once we finally do get planetfall, is if you got thrusters on the bottom of your vehicle or ship, all you're basically going to be doing is cutting the grass using flames. Because it's going to take quite a few of these thrusters to get you off the ground, I suspect. So let's go ahead and turn those off really quickly, and just let's come to a stop and disable our artificial masses. And instantly, of course, we end up bouncing up. Let's also turn on our what's the word here? Gyroscopes, and let's go a little bit like this. Doop, 2, 3, stop, And now let's try to land. So while you're in space and while we don't have full artificial masses, you can actually use these to, well, I want to say like navigate, but maybe that's not exactly right. Let's go ahead and turn those off again. Once again, we're airborne. We can, of course, make a course change like so. We can even try to bring ourselves to a stop here. Oh god. If you haven't guessed, I've set these thrusters to be maximum thrust. And we can actually pilot our ship around like this and come back down. So yeah, it's not exactly the most advanced thing. It's not exactly the most intelligent setup, but I just thought it was a nice little experiment. The one rover, the original bog standard one without these thrusters, will be up on the Steam... Oh, no, it's just as hard to control as the Mako. It will be up on the Steam Workshop if you would like to go ahead and get your hands on it and mess around with it yourself. Feel free to modify and do whatever you like. Just kindly link back to the original if you do a whole lot of modifications. And of course you can go ahead and cut down the original and just take the base frame if you want to use that. As I said, it's not the fastest thing, but I think it's a pretty decent vehicle. Now I just realized something funny. Did you see that there? I got up to 10 meters per second for a second, and of course I started seeing all those little particle effects going by, I think. No, not seeing them. Is it only when I go forward? That would be a funny thing that I never noticed before. I could have sworn I saw them for a second. Well, I think that's about it for this video. It's a pretty simple thing, but I felt like I should share it with the world. I'm pretty proud of it, as it sort of reminds me of that sort of military drone that was built a while ago that could navigate terrain on its own. It's a nice thing. Unfortunately, we do end up with a bit of an issue. Oh wow, we actually managed to make it off the ground that time. Last time I did that, I just took out the cockpit. But yeah, you do end up with a bit of an issue if you hit anything at a high speed where it might damage you. We'll find out how it does actually on planets in the future when we have hills and mountains or whatever else to climb over. Alright guys, that's it. Thank you a bunch for watching, and I shall see you guys... Oh yeah, that's my work area that you see floating up in the air. Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Ta-ta.